Hello. Welcome to another episode of The Pirate Therapist. I am Lee Perry. I am the Pirate Therapist, and I am your host for this podcast. Welcome. Today, we'd like to talk about a black sheep. What is it? What does that mean, being a black sheep? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? So let's take a moment and let's talk about that. When someone is called a black sheep, it means that they're an odd one out, a different one, someone who doesn't fit in necessarily, a member of the group that just is different than everybody else. Maybe that's a family, maybe it's a community. Maybe they just don't fit that group's norms or expectations. The implications of being called a black sheep, they stand apart from the rest of the group. They make choices that other people disapprove of. Their personality, lifestyles, beliefs, behaviors, they don't match what the rest of the group considers to be normal. I would hope at this point you all know how I feel about the word normal. I don't see that as positive. Anyway, black sheep are seen as troublemakers sometimes, or someone who does not follow tradition. Other times they're just unique and the group doesn't understand them. Well, the phrase comes from farming. Most sheep were white, and the black sheep were more rare, but they stood out, and they were considered less valuable because its wool couldn't be dyed. In modern use, the term can carry both negative or positive meanings. The negative, the black sheep, implies that you don't fit in, that you're not normal, that you're bad for some reason. You get judged and shamed and looked down on for being different. The positive, and this is what I'm pushing, is we should look at being a black sheep as a more positive thing. It's someone who is independent, creative, rebellious, bold, unafraid to break away from expectations. So, someone being a black sheep can make you feel, whether it's a positive or a negative, it can make you feel lonely or misunderstood because you don't really fit in with everybody else. So, you know how everyone in a family has that person, the one that doesn't quite blend in? Maybe they think a little differently, dream a little bigger, refuse to sit quietly at the dinner table, or they don't want to pretend that everything is fine. Well, in this episode, we're going to talk about that moment when you realize maybe I'm the black sheep, whether it felt painful or freeing or both. You ever notice how in almost every family there's someone who just stands out? Not always in the golden child who wins trophies kind of way. I'm talking about the person who doesn't blend in, who doesn't really fit into the family pattern. They may be louder, they may be quieter. Maybe they're the dreamer in a family of practical planners, or the artist in a house full of accountants. Sometimes they're the ones who just doesn't go along with the unspoken rules. You know, the rules that nobody admits exist, but everyone is expected to follow. The funny thing is, you realize or you don't realize that you're the black sheep right away. It sneaks up on you. It's in the way you're treated. You eventually feel, I don't understand why I don't fit in. I don't get it. Why am I always in trouble? It's that moment at a family gathering when you say something and the whole room goes silent. And not in the wow, that was profound kind of way, but the well, that's different kind of a silence. Or whether everyone's excited about the same thing that they've always done and you're just sitting there thinking, there has to be more to life than this. Or when you're the only one who sees the elephant in the room and you mention it, and suddenly you're the problem. Being the black sheep isn't about rebellion. Sometimes it's just about awareness of the things that people don't talk about, awareness of your own desires that don't fit the family script, awareness that the things they expect you to be don't line up with who you actually feel you are. And if you're listening to this and feeling a spark of recognition, oh, you are not alone. A lot of us grow up thinking something is wrong with us, that our difference is a flaw, a stain, or a habit that we're supposed to grow out of. But the truth is, many black sheep aren't troublemakers. They can be truth tellers. They're the ones who can't quite force themselves to fit into a box, no matter how nicely the box is decorated. That's what I'm going to be driving today. That's the point I want to make. Not just the idea of being a black sheep, but what it means emotionally, psychologically, and even spiritually to the one who stands outside of a family pattern or a group, not necessarily family. Because sometimes being an outsider doesn't mean that you're lost. It means you're on your way to becoming exactly who you are supposed to be. We take a quick stroll here into the origin of the term. Not in the history lesson kind of way, but did you know this actually comes from real sheep kind of way? It's a great metaphor to lighten things up while also grounding the metaphor. So let's talk about why black sheep exist in the first place. I mean, families are supposed to be tight little units, right? Kind of a tribe, if you will, a group of people who, at least in theory, should all have each other's backs. So why is there always someone who ends up outside of the circle? Well, here's the thing. Families create patterns, not always on purpose, but we are creatures of habit and we like our habits and our patterns. Sometimes those patterns can start generations back, beliefs that the family just kind of subscribes to. It can be habits, beliefs, hurts, expectations, even secrets that get passed down like an heirloom that nobody asked for. Every family has a rhythm. They have their own kind of culture. Some are loud and chaotic. Some are calm and traditional. Some are achievement focused. Some sweep everything uncomfortable under the rug and then stand on top of the rug pretending that everything is great. Then one day a kid is born who does not fit that rhythm. Maybe they feel things more deeply. Maybe they question things that were never meant to be questioned. Maybe they're wired for creativity in a family full of pragmatists, or they carry a boldness in a family that values keeping quiet. Maybe they speak the truth too openly in a family that survives on pretending. And families, even loving ones, don't always know how to handle those differences. Sometimes, without meaning to, they send messages like this: why can't you just be more like the rest of us? It's not always in words, often in reactions. Sometimes they just look at you with a raised eyebrow, or they joke about your choices in a way that stings. Maybe a subtle shift and perhaps some distance from you more than everybody else. The pattern of you not being taken seriously. That's how someone becomes a black sheep. It's not because they're wrong or they're bad or they're broken, but because they represent something that the family system doesn't quite know how to handle. It doesn't know what to do with that. The black sheep is often the one who carries new energy into the family, new ideas and emotional awareness, and a courage to break cycles, to do things differently. Honestly, it can be very uncomfortable. Change usually is. And families don't create black sheep intentionally. It's more like the family has one story it's comfortable telling, and then someone shows up with a completely different story, and the whole system has no idea how to react to that. But the irony, the black sheep is often the one who eventually brings the most growth to a family. Even if it takes years to see it, they're the pattern breakers, the cycle stoppers, the ones who say, this does not feel right. There has to be a better way. Something needs to be healthier than this. And even if the family never acknowledges it, those differences are often the spark that moves the whole bloodline forward. Now, if we talk about this in reality, and let's just get real about this, okay? Not every black sheep is rebellious. Sometimes they're just quiet or creative. The one with the weird passions that no one in the family understands, the one who doesn't inherit the family's collective anxiety. We explore how it feels to be misunderstood or mislabeled. We explore how it feels to be excluded. And sometimes it's not simply a sign that you were never meant to shrink into a mold. You don't fit into that box. So once you've been labeled a black sheep, whether anyone has actually used the word out loud or just something you've felt for your entire life, it starts to shape the way you think about yourself. Not always in obvious ways. Sometimes it shows up as this quiet, constant feeling of being different and not special different, more like I've missed the memo everybody else got kind of different. Maybe you felt like you've had to shrink yourself to keep the peace. Maybe you've done the opposite, leaning into being bold or funny or outrageous. Because if you couldn't fit in, you might as well stand out spectacularly. Being the black sheep teaches you different things, and it teaches you things pretty early: how to read a room, how to anticipate reactions before they happen, how to adapt, how to hide, how to protect your inner world from the people who don't understand it. It can make you incredibly self-aware, but it can also make you very self-critical. Because when you grow up feeling like you're an odd one, a different one, a broken one, you start to internalize this subtle message: there is something off about me. There is something wrong with me. And that is not the truth, by the way. That's the message that I want to take root. Okay. It's not true. There is nothing wrong. Well, maybe there is, but not because you're a black sheep. You have to start asking your questions like, why doesn't anyone else think this way? Why am I always the one who sees the problem, but nobody else wants to even admit that is there? Why do I feel things this deeply? Why do people act surprised when I speak up? And there's a tricky part. Even when you grow up, even when you move away, even when you build your own life, that feeling goes with you. It can linger, it can stay with you. But here's something that most black sheep don't realize until later. Being a black sheep actually gives you gifts that other people don't get. You tend to be better at empathy because you know what it's like to be misunderstood. It gives you resilience because you've had to stand your ground alone. It gives you creativity because you've learned to build your own path where none was existing in front of you. It gives you an emotional intelligence because you've spent years navigating people who just don't see you clearly. People who have been black sheep often grow into the most thoughtful adults. The ones who know how to comfort others, how to see a deeper truth, how to break a generational pattern. It can come with wounds, wounds around belonging, wounds around identity, wounds around feeling like you're too much or perhaps not enough. And acknowledging those wounds isn't weakness. It's the first step towards healing the parts of yourself that learned to survive instead of to shine. Being a black sheep is not a flaw. It's a role that reveals who you are becoming. And more often than not, it shapes people into the most authentic versions of themselves if they let it. So let's shift into empowerment. The black sheep tend to be the ones who eventually become the cycle breakers, the innovators, the healers, the boundary setters. I want to talk about diving into why learning to stand alone can turn into a superpower later in life. Independence and clarity, authenticity, courage. These are fantastic things that we can learn by virtue of being a black sheep. So here's a twist to this whole black sheep narrative, and it's the part that most people don't realize until they're well into adulthood. The person who didn't fit in, the one who always felt out of sync or got labeled as difficult or sensitive or weird, they usually grow up to be the strongest person in the entire family. It's almost poetic. The one who gets pushed to the edges ends up building the most powerful inner core. Here's why. Black sheep learn independence early. When you don't feel like a family system gets you, you start relying on yourself. You make your own decisions. You pursue interests that no one else shares. You learn how to stand alone and not in a lonely way, but in a quiet and powerful way. Most people don't get that skill until life forces it on them. Black sheep, we've usually been practicing that since we were young. And then there's the whole pattern breaker thing. Black sheep are often the ones who say, hey, I don't think what we're doing as a family is healthy. Or why do we always ignore a problem instead of dealing with it? Or perhaps I'm not living like this just because everyone else does. Without meaning to, they shine light on things that are in a family system that are the family is just completely uncomfortable with, and they want to keep it in the dark. They're cycle stoppers, the ones who refuse to repeat the same generational wounds, the ones who raise their kids differently, who love differently, who communicate differently. That's fantastic. But it takes courage to do that. You know, it's not a weakness. It's not you being broken. It takes strength. It takes courage to act your own way and walk your own path. Black sheep develop a deep sense of identity. When you grow up being told directly or indirectly that you don't fit the mold, you eventually realize, all right, I'll make my own mold. Doing that forces you to figure out who you really are. That's why black sheep are often become artists or entrepreneurs, healers, leaders. They become the go-to person when somebody actually needs honesty or wisdom, or simply emotionally mature people. When a family needs someone like that, they're not going to turn to the ones that get you or don't get you. They're going to turn to you because you happen to have a better grasp and a more stable emotional foundation, potentially, because they see life from they, and I mean by they, I mean we, see life from a unique angle. We feel things deeply. We notice things that other people miss. Black sheep are a force for compassion. Seriously, if you ever want to find the most empathetic person in a family, look for the one who's been misunderstood the most. They know what it feels like to be excluded. They know what it feels like to be judged before explained or labeled, to be pushed aside. They tend to be the ones who show up for others. They listen without jumping to conclusions. They give people space to be human. They become a soft landing space. People don't realize this, but families actually need their black sheep. They are the emotional innovators, the truth tellers, the ones who expand the family story instead of repeating it. And the irony, the very things that made you feel like an outsider growing up, those are the same things that make you magnetic, wise, and they help you to ground deeply later in life. They often become a lighthouse. When we take a moment to acknowledge the emotional side, sometimes being a black sheep is lonely, but sometimes it's the only path that leads you to your real family, your real community, and your real identity. This lets listen. I want you to feel seen, and I don't want you to be seen as an outsider. So let's be honest for a moment. Being a black sheep doesn't just shape you, it leaves marks, sometimes scars. Even among the strongest black sheep, we carry these quiet, invisible bruises. Things like feeling misunderstood, or feeling like you have to apologize for who you are, or feeling like you never quite earned a seat at the table no matter how hard you tried. The healing starts when you realize that those feelings aren't signs that you're broken. They're signs that you were trying to survive in an environment that was not built for someone like you. Healing isn't some giant dramatic moment, it's more like slow unfolding. It begins the day you say, maybe the story I've been telling myself about who I am is not the entire truth. And you'll know this because it doesn't feel right when you act in a way that you get praised for in your group that doesn't understand you. It doesn't feel like you're being honest or genuine, because a lot of black sheep grow up thinking that the problem was them, that they were too strange or too intense or too emotional or outspoken, maybe too quiet. I don't know, too something. But what if you weren't too anything? You were just different, and the family system wasn't flexible enough to make room for that difference. A huge part of healing is learning to give yourself the belonging that you didn't receive. Sometimes that looks like finding a chosen family, the friends that you get, the community where you finally feel normal, the people who celebrate the parts of you that others found inconvenient. There is something incredibly powerful about discovering that the traits that you were criticized for are the exact traits that people admire in you now. Another part of healing is rewriting the story you tell yourself about childhood and your role in that childhood. You might start to see yourself not as an outcast, but as the one with insight, not the rebel, but the brave one that had the courage to step forward, not the outsider, but the pioneer. Once that shift happens, you stop trying to squeeze yourself into rooms that you were not meant to fit into. You realize that you don't need permission to take up space. You don't need to earn love by performing a version of yourself that isn't genuine. And you definitely don't need to keep chasing validation from people who only ever understood a small piece of who you were. To heal also means giving your past some compassion. That younger version of you that wasn't dramatic or difficult or rebellious for no reason. Look, they were doing the best for what they had. They were trying to protect parts of themselves that no one else seemed to care about. They were surviving the only way they knew how. And they did survive. We did, which is why you're here now. Finally strong enough to examine the story instead of just living inside of it. Maybe the most freeing truth of all is that we don't have to fix everything with your family to heal ourselves. We don't need them to apologize. We don't need them to understand. We want them to. We don't need them to rewrite the past. Your healing, our healing, doesn't depend on on their participation. It begins when we decide to stop abandoning ourselves the way that they once did. Over time, we start to feel this shift, a kind of softening, a sense of coming home to the parts of us that were pushed into the shadows. Slowly, those old wounds become a source of strength instead of shame. The black sheep finds peace not by changing who we are, but by finally embracing who we've always been. So let's look at rewriting the black sheep story. Here's where a transformation can happen. Instead of seeing ourselves as the odd one out, start to see ourselves as the groundbreakers that we truly are. This is a great place to give affirmations, stories, or embracing our differences. This is where we start to acknowledge that perhaps we had good parts, that we were positive, the things we did weren't wrong, perhaps just misunderstood. You know, there comes a moment in every black sheep's life where we realize this story isn't actually mine. I just inherited it. You know, maybe it's the label, the jokes that are always thrown at us, the sideways comments. Why can't you be more like fill in the blank? All of that was someone else's script, someone else's fear, someone else's limited definition of what normal should look like. Maybe for a long time we played that role, we were the difficult one, the emotional one, the unpredictable one, the rebel, the one who didn't want to follow along, the one who didn't want to do as they were told, the one that always had to be different. But what if that was not dysfunction? What if that was originality trying to survive in an environment that did not know how to receive it? So here's a radical idea for you. You were never the problem. You were a pattern breaker. A pattern breaker rarely looks tidy while the pattern is breaking. You rewrite your story. You stop seeing yourself as the one who doesn't fit. And you start recognizing that you are the one who didn't shrink. You are the one who didn't contort yourself to match a dynamic that felt dishonest and unhealthy. You were the one with enough courage, perhaps curiosity, maybe just stubbornness, to step outside of the box that everyone else has made peace with. Yes, maybe your path looked messy. Maybe you stumbled through some things on your own. Maybe people talked about you. They whispered about you. They didn't understand you and they wanted to put you down or quiet you down. Maybe people still do, but your story doesn't need their approval. It needs your truth. The rewritten story sounds something like this. I wasn't the black sheep. I was the first light. I wasn't the outsider. I was the explorer. I wasn't too much. I was the one that refused to be less. Rewriting your story doesn't erase old chapters, but it does reframe them. Instead of seeing a childhood where you didn't belong, you see a child who was already growing in a direction that nobody recognized yet. Instead of seeing rejection, I see resilience. Instead of seeing differences and flaws, I see the exact gifts that shape the person who you can be now. Someone thoughtful, someone perceptive, someone who knows how to survive outside the lines. When you rewrite your story, you give others permission to rewrite theirs too. Now suddenly the black sheep becomes the honest one. You become the pioneer, the quiet one, the loud one, the sensitive one. They become the one who felt deeply enough to change things for the better, not changing the past, but changing the meaning, not waiting for your family to validate you, but by validating yourself, by validating your story, not as the one who didn't belong, but as the one who belonged to themselves first. I want you to question old narratives. I want you to see things that maybe you weren't being difficult. You were just being honest, genuine. Maybe you weren't the problem. Maybe you were the one who just did not want to keep doing the same patterns when you saw the flaws in those patterns. Anyway, let's slow down for a second and take a breath. This is the part where I want to talk to you, the person listening in your car or cleaning the kitchen or lying awake at night with that one thought looping in your mind. What if I really am the problem? That is a really heavy question, isn't it? The kind that moves in quiet and it sets up camp in the corners of your brain. And the truth is, the black sheep carry that question more often than anyone realizes, not because you've actually done something wrong, but because being misunderstood for so long feels like evidence that you're broken, that you're bad. So let me say this clearly, but gently. Maybe you're not the problem. Maybe you're the mirror that nobody in your family wanted to look into. Maybe you were the one who named the emotions everyone else avoided. Maybe you asked the question that exposed the cracks in the foundations. Maybe you refused to go along with the patterns that hurt you or hurt somebody else. And instead of saying, wow, thank you for seeing something we didn't, they say, why can't you just be like everyone else? It's easier for people to label you than to confront their own discomfort. So if no one has told you this yet, you get to question the story that was handed to you. Question it. It's okay. Maybe you weren't too sensitive. Maybe you weren't too emotional. You were perceptive. Maybe you felt things so deeply because no one else ever allowed themselves to. Maybe you weren't the one that was hard to get along with. You were the only one willing to break the silence. And let's be honest, black sheep, they have messy chapters in their story. We've all had moments where we acted out, shut down, or left too quickly because we were tired of feeling rejected. But those reactions don't define you. They were survival tactics in a story where you were asked to play a part that you did not fit. So imagine for just a second what your life would feel like if you stopped assuming you were the problem and started seeing yourself as a pioneer, as someone who's willing to change for the betterment of yourself and the people around you. Imagine what it would be like if you let that weight lift off your shoulders. Imagine the space that would open up inside of you. Imagine the peace that you could find. There's a truth that underlies all of this. You did not cause your family dynamic. You stopped dancing to the rhythm of it. You didn't break the family. You broke the silence. You broke the expectations and you broke the cycle. The people who don't always appreciate the person who changes the tempo, at least they don't appreciate it until much, much later. So if you've been carrying that label or the guilt or the responsibility for everyone's feelings, put it down, set it down. Let me hand you a different perspective. You're not the problem. Maybe you're the solution. Maybe you seeing things differently, acting differently, trying different things is what's going to break everyone out of that pattern and lead them to a better place. You could be that pioneer. If that idea makes something inside of you soften or feel seen, then welcome. You've now stepped into the real heart of your own story. I want us black sheep, I want us to celebrate the courage of standing out. Being a black sheep is a positive. It doesn't mean that you're a failure in the family or your group. It means that you're the evolution of it. You wrap things up with encouragement and hope and a reminder that difference is often the first sign of growth. So here we are. We've talked about labels and loneliness and strength and misunderstandings and reframing, but I want to bring it home. At the end of the day, this episode isn't about being a black sheep so much as it is about being something much bigger. Maybe it's quieter, braver, more personal. It's the courage it takes to stand in who you are, being authentic, being genuine, when everyone around you expects you to be someone else. And if you're listening right now, and I hope you're truly listening, then there's a very good chance you've spent a good portion of your life feeling like you were the outcast, the one that didn't fit in, the one who didn't play by the rules, the one who always seemed to take a path that didn't exist until you created it. And I want to celebrate that, not in a cheesy motivational poster kind of way, but in a very real, grounded human way. Because do you know how much courage it takes to continue being yourself in an environment where people don't get you, where they don't understand you? That's a lot of courage that is needed to do that. It's a courage that most people will never know. Standing out is not an easy path. It's not a path with applause or affirmation waiting at every corner. It's the path that you have to learn to carry your own validation, where you have to learn to trust your own voice, where you have to walk through the awkwardness of not fitting in before you ever get to experience the pride of standing out. And here's what I don't think most of us black sheep realize. We weren't trying to rebel. We were standing out as a way of not lying to ourselves. There's something noble about that, I think, something honest, a very deep rooted truth, an authenticity and a genuineness that we choose over approval. And it may mean years of confusion and distance and being misunderstood, but it also meant that we were pursuing our genuine selves and not abandoning ourselves to become something that somebody else wanted us to be. It doesn't matter that somebody else doesn't know how to hold space for us. Somebody doesn't understand us. It's worth celebrating that we're not giving up on ourselves and who we are. We need to be open to what people have to say to help us grow, but we also need to be honest with ourselves and listen to what feels right and what sounds right, not just what we're told. We don't want to pretend that it doesn't hurt. We don't want to pretend that it doesn't shape us, but we want to celebrate that we survived it with our integrity intact. The black sheep becomes the trailblazer once the flock realizes there's another way forward. Your courage makes space. Your uniqueness breaks molds. Your honesty clears air that's been stagnant for generations. Your growth invites others to grow. And even if your family never fully sees it, even if they never understand the role you played, your life will still radiate the truth you chose. So if no one has ever celebrated you for this, for your differences, for your resilience, your refusal to shrink, I want to celebrate you right now. You made it through the things that were not designed with you in mind. You kept walking when belonging felt far away. You kept growing in soil that wasn't soft, and you kept becoming yourself even when the world around you wanted to diminish you, wanted to make a smaller version of you. Be big, be bold, or be as understated as you think you should. The thing here is to be you. Don't try to fit into someone else's box. Always follow the dictates of your own conscience and chance the consequences. That's the Pirate King. Don't be afraid to show the world who you are. When someone calls you a black sheep, take that title with pride. It means you are your own person and do things your way, the way you feel is best, the way you feel is right and proper. Don't shrink back when called a black sheep. Stick your chest out and say, I'm 80. I'm the best black sheep I know how to be. You're not just the black sheep. You're the one who showed that another story is possible. And that's where I want to leave it today. My friends, right at the edge of a new understanding of yourself. If you've ever carried the weight of being the black sheep, I hope this episode has lightened that load a little for you. I hope you walk away knowing that you're not broken, you're not too much, and you are certainly not the problem. You are simply someone brave enough to grow in a direction that nobody else was prepared for. And that kind of courage deserves to be honored. Not someday, not when your family gets it, but right now, in the quiet moments when you finally realize that you are a black sheep. And while some may want to make you feel badly for that, do not accept that title as a negative, but as a crowning achievement of individuality. You are the one who is not afraid to do things differently. You are the one to step into your own story and not repeat the story of the people around you. Wear the title with pride and show the world that you are not afraid to stand out and to be different. If this episode touched something inside of you, take it with you. Let it settle. Think about it. Let it remind you of who you are the next time someone tries to hand you a label that does not fit. And remember, belonging doesn't start with them. It starts with you. All right, my black sheep crew, that's our journey for today. Now, for a bit of pirate wisdom before we sail off. Only fools fear the black sheep. Wise pirates know that that's the one who will lead them to new horizons. Remember this: sheep follow, black sheep choose. That's the difference. Be that difference. If they call you strange, abnormal, or weird, etc., smile wide. These are the first steps that you need to step into legendary. Thank you for listening. Thank you for showing up as you are. And thank you for letting me be a part of your journey today. So until next time, keep your compass true, your courage steady, and may the winds always favor the black sheep's courage. So for now, I bid you fair winds. Have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you next week.